In medieval England, wool became big business. There was enormous demand for wool, mainly to produce cloth, and everyone who had land, from peasants to major landowners, raised sheep. Whilst the English did make cloth for their own use, very little of what was produced was actually sold abroad. It was the raw wool from English sheep that was required to feed foreign looms. At that time the best weavers lived in Flanders and in the rich cloth-making towns of Bruges, Ghent and Ypres. They were ready to pay top prices for English wool. As the wool trade increased, lords, abbots and bishops began to count their wealth in terms of sheep. The monasteries, in particular the Cistercian houses, played a very active part in the trade, which pleased the king, who was able to levy a tax on every sack of wool that was exported. Flemish and Italian merchants were familiar figures in the wool markets of the day, ready to buy wool from lord or peasant alike, all for ready cash. The bales of wool were loaded onto pack animals and taken to the English ports such as Southampton, from where the precious cargo would be shipped to Antwerp or Genoa. The dealer or middleman was the woolman or broker, and was most likely to have the larger quantities of wool that the merchants required for foreign trade. There was a basic classification into good or middle quality wools, with younger wool being worth less. Inferior wools were maulings, skin of a sheep found dead, and shawlings, skin of a sheep recently shorn, brecklings, fragments, pell wool plucked from a dead sheep, and locks, what was left after the fleece had gone, for example from the legs. The inferior material was usually classed by the wool packer as refuse, but still exported. The wool was sampled at a collection point close to the production area, and on the basis of this an agreement was drawn up about providing a set quantity and quality of wool at a specified price. Traditionally, during the packing, a set of weights was used comprising 2 of 7 pound and 3 others of 4 pounds, 2 pounds and 1 pound. At the farm a 14-pound stone was manufactured to balance the 2 7-pound weights, so that these combined together made up the 28-pound load. The smaller weights could be used then to establish how much under or over 28 pounds any set of fleeces weighed. This method of weighing wool survived into the early 20th century, when it was regarded as a direct link with the Middle Ages. The wool was finally packed into sarplers, usually equivalent to a weight of between 2 or 3 sacks, before the journey by wagon to a port, and part of the deal was that the woolman delivered it all to the King's Beam, which was the usual place for delivery as the appointed place for the weighing of wool. The sarplers would be carefully labelled with a merchant's mark and other marks showing the source and quality of the contents, as well as a unique batch reference. Large sums of money were involved in the purchase of so much wool. Often the balance would be paid off in 3 instalments, firstly 1 at the weighing, then 2 payments at intervals of 4 or 5 months. If the wool was taken to Southampton, the weighing apparatus was located in the weigh house, known as the Possiage House. Surviving records from the Southampton Weigh House list payments made for hiring the official town weights, and record Cotswold wool dealers such as Thomas Bush finally delivering their wool into the hands of the exporters. The wool often left in seaborne convoys, where the ships were less vulnerable to piracy, while the system also enabled merchants to easily spread their precious cargo across several ships. Sailings usually happened in spring, summer and autumn. For instance, in Southampton in 1443 most wool was brought into the port in the autumn for sailing in October to December. In earlier days much of this trade would have been carried in cogs, after which the carrack became the main vessel type. The Wool House is a Grade 1 scheduled building listed as an ancient monument. According to one expert, it is the only medieval building in Europe that has had the sole purpose of storing wool, in this case prior to shipment. It was built after the French raid of 1338 by Cistercian monks as a storehouse for wool to be exported to Europe. It has 2 stories built of stone rubble with angled coins. The interior contains a fine 14th century arched collar braced roof of Spanish chestnut and umbries set in the northern bay of the west wall at first floor level with an old tiled roof. The southern end of the west wall is built in smaller, better coursed rubble than the rest of the wall house. At some stage the west wall was distorted with an outward lean, hence the addition of the 3 semicircular buttresses, probably added in the 17th or 18th century. At this time the quay front was rebuilt with segmental headed windows and central door. During the Napoleonic Wars the wool house was used to accommodate French prisoners of war, some of whose names may be seen carved on the beams of the roof. The wool house was restored by the Southampton City Corporation and opened as a maritime museum in June 1966, but is now the home of an independent specialist brewery.